Silicon Valley is, in my view, the land of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people wrongly think that they're smarter than they really are. That, in my mind, sums up Silicon Valley. No matter how many huge mistakes major companies make, everyone assumes that they're smart and have their finger on the pulse, because those companies continue to make money, even if that money comes from investors who also have no idea what they're doing. Along those lines, there's a very big mistake that a very big company is making, in my opinion. Even though a ton of publications are trying to herald it as the next big thing, I genuinely believe it will be no more than a huge waste of time, effort, and computational resources. Specifically, I'm talking about the Metaverse. Facebook's, that is Meta's, new attempt to sell you junk in VR. But first, let me tell you a little story about Second Life. Second Life, an online multiplayer virtual world that was developed way back in 2003, seemed to have a lot of promise. It promised the opportunity for users to immerse themselves in a virtual world and, as suggested by the title, live a second life. Around 2005 and 2006, if you were reading business publications at all, you would have easily believed that Second Life was the next big thing. Business Week featured it on their cover at one point. Universities purchased in-game land and attempted to hold classes in Second Life, and select users of Second Life reportedly became millionaires selling in-game land. But today, Second Life is a joke. Barely anyone in the business world knows what Second Life is anymore, and the company is basically treading water. The game seemingly maintains an average of around 40,000 users a day, which is impressive, but a far cry from its past heights. So what happened? Well, there's a few things. On one hand, Second Life was a pain to use. The virtual worlds loaded slowly, and virtually anything you did took obtuse amounts of effort. As just one example, even if you were willing to pay real-world money, it could be surprisingly difficult to find clothing you liked in-game. And most of the good stuff relied on hacky uses of the Second Life engine. And that's not even getting into how poorly the game ran. Even today, with a fiber optic connection, modern CPU, and a 3090, Second Life loads like absolute trash on my computer. On the other hand, and looking at this a little bit more broadly, Second Life suffered from its users. The kind of people that became attracted to Second Life were, well, they were sad. They were people who needed a Second Life to replace their first life. Your average user of Second Life wasn't a multi-millionaire success story, but rather someone playing virtual dress-up and pretending to be attractive and interesting. And it was, seemingly, mostly older people trying to relive their youth. This created an environment rife for trolling. After all, it was a veritable hunting ground full of weirdo boomers who wanted to pretend to be sexy models. And it wasn't hard to harass them in even insignificant ways.
You're just being rude.
No, you're being rude. You're screaming and shouting for no reason.
Because this is my home! You came into my home unannounced!
My friends and I used to do just that. But the trick was, of course, to be insidious. You didn't go in swearing or trying to blow stuff up. You'd show up and make people feel uncomfortable, something that no admin could particularly detect, but something that would fracture the social community to its core.
Why the f*** are you in my house? Out. Now.
Can I stay?
No.
Why not?
Get out. I said get the f*** out. I was going to sleep. Me and my husband are going to sleep. Can you please leave our house before I ban you?
Please don't ban me.
You're going to get banned in little 3.5 if you don't get the f*** out.
Can I watch?
For example, one of my favorite memories is harassing an in-game poetry jam by reading Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger song lyrics and pretending it was a Japanese poem.
Zyuranger, Zyuranger, Densetsu no senshi tachi yo. Zyuranger, Zyuranger, Toki no kakeru kibou. Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger.
Of course, there are many other sorts of online virtual worlds that have existed. VR chat is another, perhaps more modern example. VR chat was developed back in 2014, and really was the virtual reality equivalent of Second Life. As suggested by the title of the game, the appeal to VR chat was that it was built with VR in mind. You could enter virtual environments, chat with other users, and pretend to be people. That sort of thing.
Guilty! Guilty!
That's not how it works.
I sentenced the robot to 16 years in maximum security prison.
We have to have a trial first.
Someone stole my hammer, so I'll have to use the banana.
With that said, VR chat has already begun to exhibit many of the same problems that Second Life did. Much like Second Life, VR chat is full of, well, weirdos. People who want to pretend to be 12-year-old anime girls and sleep in VR.
Don't look at it as a taboo or stigma. It's invigorating and it stimulates your brain, your mind. It gives you the placebo effect that you always wanted.
Yes, sleep, and not in a sexual way. That sort of stuff. And, much like Second Life, this has created an environment rife for trolling. It's a bit harder to do given limitations of the engine, but you can still do it. In other words, VR chat, much like Second Life, is another example of an attempt to build an engaging virtual world that has increasingly become little more than a hanging ground for people who seem somewhat unlikely to have a first life. Now, let's finally get to the topic of this video, the metaverse. The term metaverse is increasingly being used by Facebook, which has rebranded itself Meta, to refer to the general concept of an all-encompassing virtual world where people will use virtual reality, augmented reality, and/or mixed reality to engage with virtual environment. To be clear, there is no Metaverse app. Rather, it seems that this is Meta's fancy way of doubling down on VR content. The first manifestation of this effort is the game Horizon World, which is a free VR online game that, like VR chat, allows you to walk around, talk to people, and engage with rudimentary online worlds. That's basically it. It's like VR chat, Second Life, IMView, whatever.
Tell Ballsack to chill.
Yeah. You guys are acting like you guys are on drugs.
I am on drugs.
Oh, I'm stuck. Whoa.
Needless to say, Dunning-Kruger representatives in Silicon Valley have basically lost their minds over this development, heralding the metaverse as a hot new thing that, for some reason, everyone should care about. As just one example of such stupidity, analysts at JP Morgan claim that the metaverse is a $1 trillion yearly opportunity and has opened up the world's first virtual bank. But here's the thing. The metaverse is, in my opinion, a desperate play by Facebook. Let's be honest with ourselves. The metaverse is not new and has never been new. Facebook, that is Meta, is not offering anything that hasn't been done before. All they're doing is throwing their acquisition of Oculus, their substantial corporate power, and their global social network behind the idea of virtual worlds, something that other people have been trying to do for literally decades. So why do people seem to care at all? The answer is pretty simple, and it boils down to a simple question. Who benefits from the multiverse? I don't mean this as a theoretical economics 101 style question. I really mean it. Ask yourself, critically speaking, who gains the most from the metaverse becoming a thing, especially in a world where free virtual worlds already exist? The answer is, in my mind, quite simple: corporations. They desperately want to find some new way to market to you. But let's step back a bit and paint a bigger picture of what might be going on here. I think it's pretty clear to most folks that Facebook has gotten about as big as they're ever going to get. Facebook is omnipresent, and most people have and use Facebook at some level. With that said, it appears that people are tiring of Facebook and seem to be increasingly walking away from the platform. On top of that, regulators, particularly in Europe, are beginning to nip away at Meta's ability to leverage its platform to collect data on users and sell it to external parties. Meta has historically been pretty good about buying up competing companies to keep relevant. Its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp have, in my mind, helped temporarily stave off the threat of Facebook's increasing demise. With that said, it's pretty clear that Meta can see trouble on the water. They need a new platform with new data sources and a new way to market to users. They need a way to convince you to engage with their platform in a deeper way than you already have. That is, it seems, what's motivating their push to the metaverse. All of that being said, I genuinely believe that Meta's metaverse project will fail. On one hand, like I said before, Meta's efforts are nothing new. The metaverse is yet another manifestation of Second Life, VR chat, or the like. In fact, like Second Life and VR chat, there's a very real risk that the metaverse and any apps part of it will be filled with weirdos, to the point where no one normal wants to be caught dead actively using it. Even if you're a fan of the weirdly hypersexualized chaos that is Second Life or VR chat, you're probably not going to want to dive into anything Meta produces, like Horizon World, which would be hyper-sanitized and saccharine at best. In other words, the metaverse looks like it's going to be yet another boring virtual reality chat application, except beleaguered by the expectation that you remain on your best behavior and interact politely with what are likely to be a huge group of no-life weirdo boomers. I doubt any of us would willingly pay for that experience. Moreover, I'm openly skeptical that any job would genuinely benefit from doing meetings in VR as compared to on Zoom or other platforms. All virtual meeting options suck, and most people seem to stay away from anything that requires their active engagement beyond a microphone that can be muted. On the other hand, let's be real. There's probably not a significant market for VR-enabled communities now or in the future in general. Even as a proud owner of a VR headset and a computer powerful enough to reliably drive it, I barely use my VR headset. In fact, I don't know a single person who uses their VR headset more than maybe once a month. This of course stands to reason. Even relatively simplified VR headsets require that a user dedicate themselves to the VR experience. In other words, you really can't multitask when using a VR headset. While I can scroll around idly on Facebook or Instagram while, for example, on a bus, that's not gonna be the case for the metaverse. Meta is, in effect, demanding your complete attention. That's a big and, in my mind, unrealistic request. But the real concern I have here is that there's no real benefit afforded to you by the metaverse. Every single article I read about the metaverse talks about how it will be a financial opportunity, not about it being fun, engaging, or somehow helpful for you to meet other people. I don't know about you, but the very last thing I need in my life is to spend my time, money, and/or attention engaging with a virtual world produced by a company trying to sell me something. I don't need it, never needed it, and almost certainly don't want it. In other words, I don't want to engage with JP Morgan in the first place, let alone in my free time on a platform ostensibly designed to be fun. What the world arguably needs more of is personal interaction, not some sort of abstracted idiocracy-style world where we put on our headsets to be encouraged to drink Coca-Cola. Meta doesn't understand this because they aren't thinking about you or me. They, along with other flavory drinkers in Silicon Valley, are convinced that they know better, and that they will inevitably succeed simply because Facebook is big and important. They salivate at the marketing opportunities, and that's all that matters. In other words, a bunch of self-important blowhards in Silicon Valley, and probably elsewhere, desperately want the metaverse to be a thing, and want you to believe that the metaverse will be a thing, all because it will make them money, not for any other reason. That standing alone should kill it. The metaverse should go down in history as little more than a horribly sanitized attempt at forcing people to engage with marketing in VR. Basically, Second Life without the fun, weirdo, kinky boomer crap. Now, I should be clear here. When I say that the metaverse is doomed to fail, I don't mean that the Meta headquarters is going to dramatically explode or something like that. Rather, I suspect that many of Meta's efforts are simply going to fade slowly into obscurity. Some early adopters will get excited and try stuff as they always do, but there will be no long-term adoption, and we're not going to live in a world of Ready Player One sponsored by Meta. The dissatisfying aspect of this is that even if I'm right, I won't ever be able to truly prove my claims. After all, the proof of what I'm saying now isn't going to come in 1 or 2 years, but will probably take decades to be proven. But if you take anything away from it, it's this. Silicon Valley is full of people who you shouldn't trust and who are looking for ways to exploit you for money. They, thus far, believe that they are smart because they are given money, and thus far haven't had any major setbacks, which I suspect are coming soon. Ignore these losers. Go outside and touch grass. Make real, in-person friends. That's much better. Thank you very much for watching this video. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. Please let me know what you think of the metaverse, the weirdo stuff you get up to on Second Life, or pretty much anything else you have in your mind. And thank you again.